So that was the focus. It was about a 2.5-hour meeting after I entered, and so there were discussions about the pros and cons of doing that. Early on, the president said, "What do I have to lose?" And it was actually a good opening because I said, "Mr. President, you have a great deal to lose." And so I said, "Mr. President, you're talking about putting a man in that seat who has never tried a criminal case, who's never conducted a criminal investigation. He's telling you that he's going to take charge of the department, 115,000 employees, including the entire FBI, and turn the place on a dime and conduct nationwide criminal investigations that will produce results in a matter of days. It's impossible, it's absurd, it's not going to happen, and it's going to fail." He has never been in front of a trial jury, a grand jury. He's never even been to Chris Wray's office. I said at one point, if you walked into Chris Wray's office, one, would you know how to get there? And two, if you got there, would he even know who you are? Do you really think that the FBI is going to suddenly start following your orders? It's not going to happen. He's not competent. And that's the point at which Mr. Clark tried to defend himself by saying, well, I've been involved in very significant civil and environmental litigation. I've argued many appeals in appellate courts and things of that nature. And I said, that's right, you're an environmental lawyer. How about you go back to your office and we'll call you when there's an oil spill? Along those lines, he said, so suppose I do this. So suppose I replace him, Jeff Rosen, with him, Jeff Clark. What would you do? And I said, Mr. President, I'm going to resign immediately. I'm not working 1 minute for this guy who I had just declared was completely incompetent. And so the president immediately turned to Mr. Engel, and he said, Steve, you wouldn't resign, would you?
Mr. President, I've been with you through 4 attorneys general, including 2 acting attorney general, but I couldn't be part of this.
And then I said, and we're not the only ones. No one cares if we resign. If Steve and I go, that's fine. It doesn't matter. But I'm telling you what's going to happen. You're going to lose your entire department leadership. Every single AAG will walk out on you. Your entire department leadership will walk out within hours. And I don't know what happens after that. I don't know what the United States attorneys are going to do. We have U.S. attorneys in districts across the country, and my guess would be that many of them would have resigned. And that would then have led to resignations across the department in Washington. And I said, Mr. President, within 24, 48, 72 hours, you could have hundreds and hundreds of resignations of the leadership of your entire Justice Department because of your actions. What's that going to say about you?
Look, all anyone is going to sort of think about when they see this, no one is going to read this letter. All anyone is going to think is that you went through 2 attorneys general in 2 weeks until you found the environmental guy to sign this thing. And so the story is not going to be that the Department of Justice has found massive corruption that would have changed the result of the election. It's going to be the disaster of Jeff Clark. And I think at that point, Pat Cipollone said, yeah, this is a murder-suicide pact, this letter.
I would note, too, Congressman, that it was in this part of the conversation where Steve pointed out that Jeff Clark would be left leading a graveyard, and that comment clearly had an impact on the president. The leadership will be gone. Jeff Clark will be left leading a graveyard. Finally got to I would say the last 15 minutes of the meeting, the president's decision was apparent. He announced that Jeff Clark tried to scrape his way back and asked the president to reconsider. The president doubled down, said, no, I've made my decision. That's it. We're not going to do it. And then he turned to me and said, so what happens to him now? Meaning Mr. Clark, and he understood that Mr. Clark reported to me. And I didn't initially understand the question. I said, Mr. President, and he said, are you going to fire him? And I said, I don't have the authority to fire him. He's a Senate-confirmed Assistant Attorney General. And he said, well, who has the authority to fire him? And I said, only you do, sir. And he said, well, I'm not going to fire him. I said, all right, well, then we should all go back to work.